Emmerdale teases that John Sugden has set in motion a ruthless plan to remove Robert Sugden from the picture, driven by two obsessions: protecting Aaron and concealing a murderous secret. In the low light of a late summer evening, the ancient oaks lining the lane to Home Farm whispered of long-buried family strife, as John's sleek Land Rover slipped through the iron gates with deceptive calm. Within its polished interior, John sat rigid, jaw clenched, rehearsing every detail of his scheme. Every mile brought him closer to the moment when Robert's world would shatter, and John's own facade of respectability would remain intact. Robert, meanwhile, stood in the barn at Butler's farm, fingering the edge of a dusty hay bale. His mind churned with suspicion. Over recent weeks, subtle signs had led him to suspect that John was orchestrating something sinister, something that went far beyond sibling rivalry. Robert's heart pounded as he recalled Aaron's fearful whisper, "John's changed, Rob. He's not the brother I knew." And Robert had pressed Aaron for the truth, only to be met with frantic denials and tears. Even when Robert confronted Aaron outright, Aaron had fallen silent, tears glittering in his eyes, unable to look his brother in the face. Robert's conviction grew that John was hiding a murder, perhaps the one Aaron had hinted at, and that he would stop at nothing to keep it buried. Yet whenever Robert voiced his suspicions, the world dismissed him. His long history of reckless behavior, and the rumors of jealousy over Aaron's loyalty made his warnings sound like the rantings of a bitter man. After Aaron had reconnected with John in recent months, siding with him publicly, Robert had become an outsider, an unstable catalyst in a family desperate to preserve appearances. Even his closest ally, Chrissy, had shaken her head. "You need to let this go, Robert," she had said. "People see you as the loose cannon. John's not going to listen to you." So Robert retreated into solitude, scouring his phone records, examining every message between John and their associates. He pored over bank statements for unexplained transfers, and late one night at the Woolpack, he cornered Liam Kavanagh, who had recently rejoined the fold. Liam, always eager to prove his loyalty, had shielded John in the past, and Robert knew Liam was the perfect unwitting pawn. Tonight, Robert would try again, convinced that Liam held the missing piece of the puzzle. Unbeknownst to Robert, John had anticipated this move. Early in the afternoon, before the barn meeting, John had slipped into the Kavanagh cottage under the guise of seeking property advice. While Liam was distracted by a courtesy cup of tea, John had planted a sophisticated listening device beneath the living room floorboard. It was small and nearly invisible, a gift from Ross Barton, whose loose morals had recently drawn him into John's confidence. Ross, ever eager for reward, had accepted John's overture: share any tidbits overheard, and he'd receive a cut of future payoffs. By dusk, John had settled into the back booth at the Woolpack, nursing a pint and pretending to read the evening newspaper. His gaze flicked periodically toward the door, listening for the telltale creak of floorboards, or the muted rustle of Liam's boots. When Liam finally arrived, pale and uneasy, John's eyes shone with triumph. He tipped his head toward the phone on the table. "Everything's ready," he mouthed before Liam could even sit. Meanwhile, in the barn, Robert had pulled Liam aside just as the last shafts of daylight slipped through the dusty windows. "Liam," he whispered, voice taut, "I need you to tell me the truth. What's John really up to? I know he's planning something against me." Liam's eyes darted toward the shadowy rafters. His knees trembled. John's plan depended on Liam's silence. If Liam confessed verbally to Robert, John's web would unravel. So Liam lied. "Robert," he stammered, avoiding the barn's gloom, "there's nothing. You're imagining things. John's just busy with work. That's all." The moment the words left his mouth, a suppressed signal crackled through the bug under his feet. John's steel-nerved face at the pub table split into a triumphant grin. He snapped his paper down, drained the remains of his pint, and stood, brushing off his coat. Ross slid into the seat opposite, nodding at the paper. They fell for it, John hissed. He bought every word. Ross chuckled. We'll share a dram when we're done. You sure he won't suspect? John's dark eyes gleamed. Not a chance. Now that I've got Liam's denial on tape, I can make it look like Robert is paranoid, and that Aaron is behind it all. The family will see Robert as unhinged. And when the time comes, he tapped the side of his nose. He'll disappear. By nightfall, Robert had returned to the village, only to find the Woolpacks' door swinging in the breeze. Inside, flickering TV light cast shadows over the rumpled furniture. Chrissy was tucked into an armchair, remote in hand, and she glanced up. Robert, she sighed, you're looking worse than a man who's just been told his farm's on fire. He pressed her for help, detailing his conversation with Liam and voicing his suspicions that John had planted lies. But Chrissy frowned. Robert, Liam's a decent guy. He wouldn't lie to you. She snatched the remote, raising the volume on the local news. A reporter spoke of escalating tension in the Sugden family, but made no mention of murder or betrayal. Instead, she cited unnamed sources claiming Robert's jealousy over Aaron's closeness to John was at the root of the friction. See? Chrissy said, pointing at the screen. They've spun it already. You don't stand a chance. Frustrated and isolated, Robert trudged out into the cool night. The buildings of Emmerdale glinted with lamplight behind him, the croppers, the cafe, the church, all bearing witness to his plight. He knew one thing for certain: he had to expose John before it was too late. But how, when every avenue he tried was quietly blocked? The next morning, a series of bizarre accidents cemented Robert's fear. First, the tractor at home farm malfunctioned, brakes cut, nearly sending him over an embankment. Then, at the stables, a feed bag tore open, scattering oats and forcing Robert into a corner as horses bolted wildly. Each incident, though attributed to misfortune by locals, bore the telltale signs of John's handiwork. But Robert lacked proof. He had only vague inklings, a gnawing certainty, a man's word against his brother's. That afternoon, Robert sought refuge in the old chapel on Sugden land, hoping to pray for clarity. As he knelt in a pew, the quiet broke with the chirp of his phone. A text from Aaron: meet me tonight by the river. I can't talk here. Robert's pulse quickened. At last, a chance to learn the truth directly from the brother who had first sounded the alarm. Before dusk, Robert made his way to the riverbank, where the willows draped their branches over the water like mourners at a graveside. Aaron stood in the shadows, shoulders hunched. As Robert approached, Aaron's face flickered with remorse. I'm sorry I've been distant, Aaron began softly. John threatened me. He told me if I ever spoke of what happened that night, he'd ruin me. Aaron's voice cracked at the memory. I was scared. Robert knelt beside him. What happened? Aaron swallowed. That night, you remember Sarah's accident? His gaze wavered. It wasn't an accident. John pushed her. Robert's breath caught. Sarah, their cousin, whose death had been blamed on a drunken fall months ago. John had always insisted it was tragic misfortune. But Aaron's words summoning that awful memory. A tussle on the moor, a scream, and her body crumpling against the rocks. Robert's hands trembled as he gripped Aaron's arm. Why are you telling me now? He whispered. Aaron's eyes glistened. Because he's going to do something even worse to you. You need to run, Rob. Go far away. Robert's heart pounded. This was it, the truth he had risked everything to uncover. But as he turned to ask more, a twig snapped behind them. Robert froze, senses prickling. The moonlight glinted on a steel barrel. He spun to see two figures stepping from the reeds, masked, silent, and armed. His blood ran cold. John's plan had moved from sabotage to outright violence. The first assailant lunged, but Robert reacted instinctively, twisting aside. Aaron backed away in shock, calling his name. Robert squared his shoulders, heart hammered, but he refused to be cowed. As the attacker advanced, Robert snatched a fallen branch and swung it with all his strength. The masked man staggered, and Robert pressed his advantage, driving the intruder toward the water's edge. In the fight's chaos, Aaron grabbed Robert's arm and pulled him away. They fled through the undergrowth, Aaron stumbling, Robert guiding him. Behind them, angry shouts echoed through the willows, promises of violence and the unmistakable bark of a gunshot. Robert dared not look back. He gripped Aaron's hand, sprinting until the brambles cut at their legs and their breath came in ragged gasps. When they finally collapsed on a bank high above the river, trembling and soaked by dew, Robert pressed Aaron close. His mind spun with questions. How had John orchestrated this ambush so precisely? Who else would carry out such an attack? Before dawn broke, Robert made a choice. He would no longer run. John had cast him as villain and fool, now Robert would force the truth into the light. First, though, he needed evidence. Solid proof that John had murdered Sarah, sabotaged his machines, and now tried to kill him. As they crept back toward the village under a pale sky, Robert formulated a plan. He'd approach Ross Barton, the one man who'd taken John's bait before, who had aided John with eavesdropping devices. Ross despised Robert, but he might respect proof. If Robert could confront Ross with evidence of John's funding for illegal surveillance, Ross might be swayed, or at least, forced to testify. Hours later, Robert found Ross in the barn at Barton's yard, tinkering with a motorbike. Ross charged look up, scowling. "Sugden," he growled. "Thought you'd be lying low." Robert dropped a handful of bramble-soaked USB sticks on the workbench. "You wired Liam's cottage for John," he said. "These are recordings of your meetings, payment details, instructions. So tell me, Ross, how much did John pay you to spy on me?" Ross's face paled as he rifled through the drives. He heard the incriminating conversation. John's calm voice instructing him to gather everything, then report to me. Ross's jaw clenched. "You got me there," he muttered. "But you're still as crooked as he is." Robert shook his head. "No more lies. You help me expose John, or I hand these to the police." Ross spat out a curse. He hated Robert, but he hated prison more. After a long moment, he pounded the bench. "Fine. But I want immunity. You go to the cops, you go without me." Robert nodded. He had Ross's cooperation, but the rest of the Sugden clan, and the authorities, would need more than one witness. He needed Aaron's testimony, plus physical proof of John's tampering with tractor brakes, and the medical examiner's report on Sarah's fall. And all the while, John would be tightening his net. As Robert left the yard, clutching a small recorder that held Ross's confession, his phone buzzed with a single message from an unknown number: "Drop this or someone else dies." The words weighed heavy, but Robert steadied his shoulders. He had come too far, been attacked, abandoned, forced into hiding. Now, he would fight. His first stop was Home Farm, under the guise of reconciling with John. He needed access to John's safe, where he'd hidden the deed to Sarah's coroner's file. That file would show that Sarah's injuries were inconsistent with a simple fall. Robert rehearsed his story as he drove, feigned remorse, talk of brotherly love, a plea to move forward. Somewhere in John's guarded stare he'd glimpsed the truth, an admission, or a slip, before striking. As the sun dipped low behind the hills, Robert parked outside the grand stone facade of Home Farm. He stepped out, shoulders squared, heart pounding with both fear and righteous fury. Entering the grand hallway, he paused to take in the familiar portraits lining the walls, ancestors who had built this estate. Tonight, their legacy would be reclaimed from the man who betrayed them all. In the drawing room, John sat by the hearth, arms folded, a cold smile on his lips. Robert took a breath. "John," he began, voice steady. "We need to talk." John's eyes glittered. "I've been expecting you." And so the confrontation began, a battle of words and wills that would decide whether Robert could unmask John's murderous secrets, or become the next victim in his brother's deadly game. Emmerdale teases that the reckoning between Robert and John Sugden is finally upon them. The flicker of lamplight danced across the high ceilings of Home Farm's drawing room, casting long shadows as Robert stepped forward, his recorder clutched in one hand, Aaron by his side. Across from them, John sat unmoving, face carved in stone, as though he'd been waiting for this moment his entire life. "John," Robert began, voice steady but low, "we both know why I'm here. You pushed Sarah that night. You tampered with my tractor brakes. You sabotaged Liam's testimony. And when I started closing in, you sent men to kill me." He pressed play on the recorder. John's cool stare cracked as the room filled with his own voice ordering Ross Barton to install bugs and feed him incriminating lies about Robert's sanity. John rose with deliberate calm. "You think a shabby tape and Aaron's hysterics will topple me? This estate, this family, they are mine. You've squandered everything on your selfish vendettas." Aaron stepped forward, trembling. "You threatened me, John. You told me to stay silent about Sarah, or you'd destroy me." His voice wavered but firmed. "I won't live in fear anymore.